Have you ever felt your heart go suddenly silent, as if an invisible door had slammed shut inside you? This is the delicate moment Carl Jung called psychological detachment, when a narcissist realizes they have utterly lost control over your heart and mind. According to Jung, the most terrifying thing for a narcissist isn't your rage, but your deep indifference, because only then does their dazzling mask begin to crack. In today's video, we'll explore 7 silent signs that you have defeated a narcissist without even knowing it. From the subtle shifts in how they try to reclaim your emotions to the powerful quiet of your own, each sign reveals the sophisticated ways a narcissist operates under the lens of Jungian psychoanalysis. We'll decode gaslighting tactics, hoovering maneuvers, and the phenomenon of hollow mimicry, all through the eyes of the man who spent his life studying the shadow and how we free ourselves from it. Stay with us until the end of the video so you don't miss any fingerprints of psychological liberation. Because only when you've identified them all can you be truly free. And that, ultimately, is the real victory. Turn by. The moment your indifference becomes the only language you speak to a narcissist, a series of subtle shifts begins to unfold, and that is precisely when you silently win without even knowing it. Below are the 7 silent signs, each a piece of the Jungian puzzle showing how you free yourself from their shadow. The moment your indifference becomes the only language you speak to a narcissist, a series of subtle shifts begins to unfold, and that is precisely when you silently win without even knowing it. Below are the 7 silent signs, each a piece of the Jungian puzzle showing how you free yourself from their shadow. Sign 1. The power of silence. When you choose silence, it isn't out of weakness, but because you have tapped into the deepest reserve of your inner strength. According to Carl Jung, silence is not merely not speaking, but a psychological declaration, a complete detachment from the emotional drama the narcissist desperately tries to sustain. Of all the ways one can react to hurt, from screaming to pleading, from fighting to fleeing, only silence truly disorients them. They don't feed on love or compassion. They feed on the reactions they provoke in you. When you stop reacting, you cut off the primary fuel they use to manipulate you. First, imagine a raging wave crashing ashore, loud, chaotic, overwhelming. That's the narcissist's state when they fail to stir your emotions. Your silence, like a glassy sea without a ripple, is a scene they've never witnessed. Jung calls this psychological detachment, a total psychic separation, not just withholding words. It's when you stop expecting, stop hoping, stop explaining, stop trying to make them understand. You simply exist, unmoved by their tactics. Second, powerful silence is an inviolable boundary. You refuse to let their words, their gaze, or their attempts at emotional sanitizing penetrate your mental space. Every time you ignore repeated messages or hold a brief moment of stillness instead of plunging into conflict, you claim a space reserved solely for yourself. Jung emphasized that, to begin individuation, you must learn to separate another's shadow from your own. Silence is your first barrier against their shadow invading and unsettling you. Next, recognize the transformative potential of silence. When you offer no explanations and no defenses, you deny them any map to manipulate you. Your long-winded apologies only inflate their balloon of control, delighting them in your confusion. Silence, by contrast, allows that balloon to deflate with no one to pump it back up. They will try again and again, flooding your inbox, making frantic calls, even deploying fake apologies, but your calm remains. This calm isn't indifference, it is awakened self-possession. You have transcended the need to be understood or validated. Over time, the narcissist will shatter their own illusion. They are accustomed to your reactions, anger, tears, pleading, but confronted with your silence, they panic as if they've lost their compass in the dark. Jung observed, "The horror for a narcissist is not anger, but deep indifference. They realize that you no longer follow the script they wrote. That is when their power begins to crumble, pieces of their facade falling away before they can gather them." The key is that powerful silence is not a single moment, but a layered process requiring patience and resolve. At first you may face chaos, relentless texts, incessant calls, even hollow apologies meant to lure you back. But if you hold firm, they will repeatedly crash against the wall of your silence because they have no other language. When all that remains is emptiness, you will discover, I don't need to speak, I don't need to explain, I simply need to hold on to my peace. Finally, powerful silence grants you the greatest gift, self-mastery. No one can take from you the right to remain silent and refuse to play their unbalanced game. In your silence, you stand with yourself, affirming that your emotions, values, and boundaries are inviolable. That is the true emblem of freedom. You are no longer a victim of their mind games, you are the director of your own. Moreover, silence is not only the foundation of personal victory, but also proof of your inner healing power. In the stillness, you create space to acknowledge past wounds, to dialogue with yourself, and to rediscover your most authentic self. As Jung said, silence, amid the storm, is the birthplace of clarity. Let your silence be the guiding light on the path of individuation, where you no longer dissolve into another's shadow, but shine with your own. Sign 2, hollow mimicry, the empty replica. When you begin to hear again the very phrases about self-love, boundaries, or self-understanding that you once shared but detect a hollow ring beneath the lips that now repeat them, that is the moment of hollow mimicry, the narcissist's empty copy exposed. They have not undergone any real healing or inner work. They merely borrow your language and your style to lure you back into the old emotional drama. In Jungian terms, this is not true resonance, but simply the persona, the social mask being repainted in artificial colors, mimicking the surface, empty of depth. In Jungian psychology, the persona is the face we present to the world, while the shadow comprises the unacknowledged or hidden parts of the self. When a narcissist deploys hollow mimicry, they repaint their old persona, the image of someone listening, growing, or self-aware, without ever touching their own shadow. They parrot the way you once comforted yourself after wounds, but they have never embarked on the journey of individuation to truly understand or heal their own inner pain. They, in your words, imagine you once said, I learned to set boundaries to protect my energy. Sometime later they echo back, I too have realized that boundaries are the only way to love oneself. On the surface, you hear your own words, but the tone, the rhythm, and the meaning have shifted. They are trying to use your language as a bridge, yet every word lacks genuine ties to personal experience. This is the clearest sign. What they say does not match what they do. The power of contrast. Hollow mimicry not only unsettles you, but also confuses those around you. They hear the promise of change and may momentarily believe the performance. Yet as soon as they observe the actual behavior, old patterns repeating, belated apologies that vanish as quickly as they arrive, doubts flare. Jung described this as a form of projection. The narcissist projects an image of transformation outwardly, while their shadow, containing all unacknowledged needs, remains buried in darkness. Watch for words on the wind. The easiest way to spot hollow mimicry is to track real progress. Do they offer the same apologies you once used to heal yourself? Do they commit to the boundaries you taught them? And yet, within a day or following a new conflict, do the old abusive behaviors resurface? When words mirror yours but actions remain out of sync, you're witnessing a scripted performance, not a genuine desire to heal. Why they cannot go deep. Jung emphasized that true transformation only comes when one faces and integrates one's shadow. Narcissists fear shadow work above all. They dodge anything that carries pain, guilt, or responsibility. Hollow mimicry springs from an avoidance mechanism. Rather than engage in self-examination, they simply simulate the appearance of healing. This lack of depth causes every new intention to collapse, exposing its falseness. Your response. Faced with hollow mimicry, hold fast to your psychological detachment. Don't let their flowery words pull you back into the old loop. Observe their actions. Truly healed people maintain emotional consistency across contexts. not only when it's convenient. You might gently ask, what steps have you taken to uphold this change over time? Wait for concrete examples. If you hear only familiar phrases with no evidence, it's still an empty replica. Next, step on your individuation journey. Recognizing hollow mimicry not only protects you, but also tests your commitment to individuation, the process of returning to your authentic self. Each time you refuse to react to their staged performance, you reinforce your own intrinsic value. You are not an audience for their drama, but the author of your life's story. As Jung said, only when you acknowledge your inner darkness can you create true light. Use this clarity to discern between empty words and heartfelt deeds. Freedom through clear vision. Ultimately, hollow mimicry offers you the opportunity to break free from deception. When you no longer marvel at their words and assess sincerity by deeds alone, you become psychologically immune to every act. This does not make you callous. On the contrary, you deepen your compassion for yourself and even for them, while refusing to be drawn into their web of lies. Remember, a phrase that echoes yours is not your phrase. Your power lies in seeing beyond the surface. When you no longer fear missing out on one last chance for their real change, you reach the pinnacle of inner freedom, and in that silent victory, no one understands better than you. Sign 3. Escalating gaslighting, yet spectacularly failing. Once you reach the threshold of psychological immunity, the state in which you no longer depend on being understood or explained to, a narcissist's gaslighting, will enter its most frenzied phase. They realize that mild tactics like denial, distortion, or hesitation no longer rattle you. So rather than back off, they turn up the heat. Their gaslighting escalates only to fail miserably. At first, the gaslighting takes the form of innocuous denials. I never said that. You must be imagining things I didn't do that. But when you remain silent, refusing to let those distortions deepen your pain, the narcissist is forced to change tactics. They begin to feign faux sincerity and push you into elaborate explanations. Tell me exactly what you mean. Maybe I don't remember correctly, but give me a chance. Their goal is to draw you back into the tangle of words so they can harvest emotional fuel from the argument. Carl Jung described gaslighting as a form of projection, casting their own shadow, their unacknowledged doubts, guilt, and faults onto you. When you refuse to take their accusations as your cue to react, they lose their foothold. In desperation, they bend the truth even further, calling friends and family into the fray, launching a smear campaign. They spread rumors that you're overly stressed, overreacting, lying, or depressed. Each whispered allegation carries the weight of social proof, trapping you in a net of collective validation. But at this stage, you no longer seek external validation. You have cultivated self-validation, grounded in your own experience and values. You know your emotions, memories, and limits. When rumors fly, you don't panic, you observe with clarity. This is just theater to draw attention. Jung called this individuation the process of separating yourself from another's shadow and returning to your true self. Because of that, you are no longer a target to be doused or stirred up. The next escalation typically becomes deeply personal attacks. They name your every flaw, dredging up wounds you tried to conceal. They hurl cruel jabs from "you're too sensitive" to "you'll never grow up," all meant to awaken deep-seated guilt. But with your psychological detachment, you refuse to fall into self-doubt. Instead of questioning yourself, you respond with a wordless calm. You hold your boundary and let their words bounce off. When even personal attacks fail to provoke you, gaslighting evolves again into invalidation and deliberate self-doubt tactics, denying shared memories, reneging on promises, even orchestrating confusing scenarios designed to throw you off balance. Yet with a fortified inner self, you filter out the lies. You collect evidence, messages, journal entries, third-party witnesses, so that every time they deny the truth, you can simply smile at the glaring gap between their words and reality. Jung referred to this as active imagination, an inner dialogue that helps you distinguish real emotion from illusion. Finally, Gaslighting reaches its climax in a final challenge. They force you into a back-and-forth choice: remain silent or resume the fight. They expect that if you stay silent, you have been defeated and are afraid, but at that moment they have already lost. For your silence is not avoidance, it is a declaration. I am no longer the victim. I don't need to prove or defend myself. I have attained self-sovereignty. Remarkably, when gaslighting no longer works, the narcissist's only response is inner chaos. They become disoriented, as if a storm-driven ship without a compass. Jung observed, when a narcissist no longer receives reactions, they crash into the empty wall of their own making. They wonder, why aren't they speaking up? Why aren't they crying? Why aren't they angry? The answer: you have freed yourself from the vicious cycle, and that is sign 3. Gaslighting escalates, but fails. Not because you are weak, but because of the steadfast power of self-awareness and psychological detachment. You neither defend nor compromise. You simply close the door on their manipulations and step into a realm of inner freedom, a place where memories remain intact, emotions are honored, and your value needs no external confirmation. On this journey, you may feel lonely. Few understand the power of silence. Yet, Jung taught, 60% of healing occurs in inner silence. When gaslighting collapses, you are the silent victor. Next, we'll explore the vanishing army phenomenon, sign 4, revealing how the narcissist grows more isolated as you cease to play their game. Stay with us. Sign 4. The flying monkeys disappear. The moment you relinquish any effort to explain, prove yourself, or seek their empathy, a strange phenomenon begins to unfold. The flying monkeys, friends, family, colleagues who once believed the narcissist's story quietly withdraw, as if hypnotized by an invisible magnetic field. Carl Jung described that when an individual enters the stage of individuation, separating from the influence of the persona, social mask, the small community around them undergoes a kind of collective psychological awakening. The legion that once rallied around the narcissist now appears confused, no longer cheering them on and unsure whose side to take. At first, they simply go silent. No more likes, no comments, no responses to the narcissist's half-hearted messages designed to test you. Next comes the cutting communication phase. Calls go unanswered, messages remain unread, green, and planned meetups, or coffee dates meant to reignite the bond are abruptly cancelled. You might not see them turn their backs all at once, but you can feel the void growing day by day. Gone are the fake words of encouragement and the nods affirming the narcissist's narrative. Those flying monkeys become mere shadows in your life. According to Jung, the narcissist persona is nourished by external feedback. When you go silent and refuse to supply that feedback, their persona loses its root of existence. Even the legion itself notices the contradiction. They once followed the script the narcissist wrote, accusing you of doing something wrong, misunderstanding them, or making things up. Now, instead of feigning belief, they ask themselves, is it really as he described? Why isn't she reacting? Why isn't she resisting? Why is she silent? Once that question arises, they can no longer pretend, and so they step back. This withdrawal is not betrayal, but rather proof that the circle around the narcissist has recognized a gap in authenticity. They no longer wish to partake in a drama directed by the narcissist. Jung called this reverse shadow projection. Instead of projecting the narcissist's darkness onto you, those once controlled by that darkness now see it in the person who once idolized them. When the dazzling facade begins to crack, the flying monkeys simply vanish. Picture a group of close friends. Once they would defend every excuse the narcissist made, even criticize you when you spoke up. But now they avoid you, forget your birthday, and cancel important plans at the last minute, citing emergencies. It's not that they hate you, just that they no longer want to play a supporting role in that painful drama. Your silence has shown them the story is no longer so simple, and they refuse to remain bit players in someone else's fiction. You might hear rumors. He said you've changed, that you can't understand him like before. Instead of getting angry, smile and realize, when others spread those stories, they're merely rationalizing their own withdrawal. They're not attacking you, they're absolving themselves of responsibility for choosing to step away. Jung emphasized, people truly mature only when they take responsibility for their choice to leave, not when they feel forced to stay. Use this sign as proof of your silent victory. Rather than feeling hurt by being abandoned, feel proud that you've reached psychic immunity, an inner state where you need no one's approval or protection. The flying monkeys disappearing doesn't mean you've lost relationships. It means you've shed the old skin and made room for new, genuine connections. Finally, this is a pivotal step on your path of individuation. Jung said, only when you're no longer the final link holding tangled relationships together do you truly feel your own value. The vanishing legion is not your defeat, but your ultimate trial. One that propels you out of the narcissist's web and toward a new community built on respect, authenticity, and equality. So when those flying monkeys vanish into thin air, don't mourn their disappearance is your triumph. You no longer depend on their judgment. You've created the inner space to flourish freely. Next, prepare for sign 5, the final hoovering trick, the narcissist's last staged scene before admitting total defeat. Stay tuned so you don't miss it. Sign 5, the final hoovering trick. When all gaslighting tactics have crumbled and the flying monkeys have quietly slipped away, the narcissist often unleashes one last hoovering maneuver, a carefully staged act designed to suck you back into their web of control. In English, to hoover means to vacuum, and here hoovering is their final bid to vacuum up the emotional supply you've withdrawn. Once you stand firm in your psychological detachment, be ready. This trick often arrives wrapped in its most romantic and most counterfeit guise. At first, you may get an unexpected message. I miss you so much. Do you remember the morning sunshine by the window? Or a late night call? I've been up all night thinking about all the ways I was wrong. Sometimes they offer rosy promises. This time you'll see I've truly changed, no regrets. Every phrase is packaged in the familiar language you once taught them about healing, self-love, and boundaries. But Jung warns, words without real action are hollow mimicry, meant only to deceive you into returning. Hoovering relies on projection. They project onto you the very needs they haven't fulfilled in themselves. They exaggerate fond memories so you'll feel nostalgic and think, if I go back, things will be okay. They seize on any flicker of your loneliness or fatigue and blow it into a beacon of false hope. Their words feign remorse, yet underneath lies an agenda to make you question your decision to leave. In Jungian psychology, hoovering is an expression of the shadow, the dark side of the self they refuse to integrate. Rather than confront real pain and change, they exploit your memories and emotions to sustain their fake persona. When you recognize hoovering through the lens of individuation, you see it not as an invitation to return, but as a trap to keep you playing their role. Your refusal to respond proves your individuation is on track. The ideal response to hoovering isn't anger or a long rebuttal, but calm equanimity. You've built your psychological immunity on self-validation. When you hear their belated apologies, simply ask yourself, what exactly are they saying? What promises? What evidence of lasting change? Without concrete proof, no stable shift in behavior, it's mere empty talk. Jung reminded us that words alone cannot heal. Only shadow work, the inner work of integration, yields real change. Sometimes they'll try collective hoovering, sending messages through mutual friends, asking others to attest to their efforts, or even using family members to broker a reunion. This is a twisted form of collective psychological awakening. They beg their old allies for help, but you are no longer the linchpin in their manipulation. The once faithful flying monkeys now find themselves in the awkward position of defending someone who no longer commands their belief. When hoovering fails, the narcissist often descends into an existential terror, as Jung described, because they realize you no longer depend on them to define yourself. They cannot suck you back in, because you have claimed your freedom. That moment marks your complete victory, They expose their own impotence while you stand ever firmer on your healing journey. Ultimately, hoovering is like a vacuum cleaner, throttled to maximum power, but unable to create any suction, revealing only the machinery of deceit. When you refuse to fall for their trap, your silence wields more power than any explanation. Jung affirmed, "Truth doesn't need defending, it defends itself." Your inner peace stands as irrefutable proof that the hoovering has utterly failed. Sign 6. The mask cracks. When a narcissist first presents themselves to the world, they perform a dazzling persona, a confident, glamorous image ready to understand and defend you. But as Carl Jung pointed out, the persona is merely a mask. It serves a specific purpose to attract attention and manipulate others' emotions. And the moment you quietly free yourself from their influence, that very mask begins to crack, revealing the jagged edges of a false self. The first cracks. Imagine watching a celebrated actor on stage, every movement and line perfect. Then, mid-play, a strap holding their mask slips, exposing an unrefined edge. With a narcissist, the first crack often appears as an offhand, tone-deaf remark, a tactless comment, a hollow look, or a lifeless gesture that makes you sense something has lost its cohesion. Jung described this as the moment the persona first reveals its void, the dark, wounded shadow still hidden beneath. Words versus actions. The glossy mask shatters most noticeably when actions and words diverge. For example, they may proclaim, "I always put you first," yet fail to follow through in caring for you or remain indifferent during your crises. Each time you collect evidence, text history, call logs, or third-party testimony, you gather fragments to piece together the truth. Jung noted that when a persona can no longer sustain lived experience, it disintegrates, and the true self, even if fragile, rises in its place. Echoes of the shadow. A cracked mask not only exposes deceit but also lays bare the buried shadow, the fear of abandonment, the unhealed wounds, and self-hatred. As the fissures widen, you may witness them clinging to you more desperately, even begging for attention like a frightened child. Jung argued that the shadow consists of the traits we refuse to accept, and a narcissist will thrust their shadow forward once the persona no longer holds. That is why they become so dependent on your reactions to fill the inner void, your response to the cracks. When you notice their mask beginning to splinter, you may feel surprised or even hesitate. Am I misunderstanding? But Jung encouraged us to use active imagination and inner dialogue of questions like, why did they do that? Does this align with who they claim to be? By resolutely examining the cracks, you refuse to let the narcissist conceal their shadow behind glittering veneer. This awareness helps you maintain psychological detachment, separating yourself without losing compassion. The collapse of the false self. Once the mask shatters wide open, the fabricated persona spirals into chaos. They may lash out, accusing you of not giving them a chance to fix things, then flip into self-pity. You don't understand me. Jung called this the persona's temporary psychological death. The bright mask can no longer balance itself, and the true ego inside recoils. Watch closely. This is when they are most vulnerable, and when you risk being swept up in overwhelming emotions if you lose your boundary. Tools to see the cracks. To avoid falling for a broken persona, arm yourself with keen observation. Record discrepancies between promises and actions. Compare their behavior in public versus private. Jung termed this shadow work illuminating darkness with conscious awareness. The more you examine, the sharper the cracks appear, confirming you owe them no more explanations. Freedom born from the fracture. Ironically, the cracked mask becomes your gateway to inner freedom. When you clearly recognize the narcissist's true nature, every shard of that false persona, you stop hoping for a miraculous transformation. You shift your energy to rebuilding your own sense of worth. As Jung said, only when the false self is broken can the true self emerge. That crack is the starting point for you to rediscover yourself and forge a genuine persona grounded in your deepest values. redefining the relationship. Finally, once their persona is shattered and the shadow exposed, you face two choices: remain in the fragments of that drama or step into the light of truth. Jung champions individuation, returning to the whole self and refusing to let others define you. By shedding illusions, you can either reconstruct the relationship on honesty or decisively walk away to preserve your integrity. Through sign 6, the mask cracks. You not only witness the collapse of a false persona, but gain the chance to build a new one, a face that honors your inner truth. When you see the fracture, don't divert your gaze. Follow the light streaming through and let it guide the rebirth of your most authentic self. In the next segment, we'll explore sign 7, the inner disintegration, the final stage marking your silent triumph over the narcissist. Stay with us. Sign 7, the inner disintegration. When all their gaslighting tricks have crumbled, when the hoovering attempts have failed and the flying monkeys have quietly slipped away, the narcissist's very core, the seemingly invincible framework of their power, begins to disintegrate from within. There is no thunderous explosion, no dramatic collapse. It is a hauntingly slow process, like glass hidden in the chest cooling, until tiny cracks widen, until nothing remains to mask the void. Carl Jung called this moment the psychological death, the shattering of the false self that once thrived on your reactions and your gaze. The first tremors. At first, you may notice only a flicker of unease. They no longer stride confidently in conversation. Their glance starts anxiously, as if searching for the mirror that once reflected their borrowed identity. Sometimes they force a smile or stammer polite words, but their speech, no longer fluid, betrays the fractures beneath. Jung emphasized that the persona, the social mask, lives only by external feedback. Once you stop supplying emotional fuel, that persona cannot sustain itself. The result is an inner core untethered, like a house without pillars, gradually collapsing. Emotional turbulence. Over the following days, you'll witness them switch tactics through a whirlwind of emotions, from illusions of invincibility to panic and despair. They may erupt in unprecedented rage and then immediately plunge into deep despondency. These swings reveal a self-fragmented layers of unaddressed shadow now overflowing, no longer containable by any mask. Jung described this as the inner darkness bursting forth, when the persona's web of illusion can no longer hold it. Cracks in the everyday. You'll see the disintegration most clearly, not in grand proclamations, but in small, telling actions. Messages sent and then deleted, apologies that morph into new accusations, half-hearted smiles devoid of warmth. They may cling to others for solace, but not to connect, only to grab a fleeting sense of validation in your silence. They might even attempt another round of reassembling the flying monkeys, but you're too mindful to fall into that snare. Each failed maneuver deepens their sense of impotence, like ink smudged across their identity map. Psychological disintegration. At this stage, the ego they relied on, a fabricated self built on the reflections of their victims, loses shape entirely. Jung called this psychological disintegration, the complete collapse of the constructed persona, exposing an empty husk that cannot define itself without someone to manipulate. They can no longer stage any drama. There is no audience, nor can they summon new spectators because their inner compass has lost its bearing. You're witnessing. Remarkably, you will not be startled or frightened by this disintegration because you prepared for it. You nourished self-validation, honed your psychological immunity, and fortified your boundaries. When their final ruse fails, simply observe patiently. Do not rush to rescue them. Maintain your safe distance. Jung taught, once you make the unconscious conscious, you free yourself from the fate that once controlled you. By witnessing the narcissist's inner collapse, you shine light on their hidden darkness. Moments of vulnerability. You may catch them in pitiful moments, ripping up meaningless diary entries, deleting old photographs, or dialing your number at 2 a.m. to sob uncontrollably. This is their inner shadow materializing, forcing them to confront what they have long denied. Jung believed that healing begins when one bravely sits with one's shadow, and a narcissist has never willingly done so. When compelled to face it, their false self topples into crisis. The final silence. Ultimately, the disintegration culminates in an absolute silence. No heartfelt apology, no pleas for restitution, only a profound emptiness. For Jung, silence is not absence, but the pure presence of the self. Here, your silence and theirs converge. One represents freedom, the other void. You, steadfast in your psychological detachment, become living proof of this truth. Once you stop playing the victim, the narcissist loses their foundation for existence. The inner disintegration is not a victory of vengeance, but a triumph of freedom. You need not seek revenge, simply continue your own healing path. Their persona has collapsed, their false self dissolved, and you walk forward bathed in your own light at peace and unthreatened. Jung said, choosing your own self over someone else's false self is a rebirth. Here, you do not just shatter their darkness, you are reborn yourself. Through these 7 signs, you have transformed from silent observer into silent victor, the quiet conqueror. There was no grand battle, only a powerful inner journey that gradually stripped the narcissist of their power. Remember, this victory is not theirs to claim, but yours to embody freedom, wholeness, and the rebirth of your authentic self. So, we have journeyed together through the 7 silent signs that prove you not only survived a relationship with a narcissist, but quietly triumphed over them in the most profound and lasting way. From the moment of powerful silence to the narcissist's inner disintegration, each step you took both revealed a hidden corner of your own psyche and exposed the true self beneath their mask. The miracle is not in any dramatic showdown, but in the patience to remain silent when every gaslighting trick, every hoovering attempt, and every hollow mimicry simply failed. This is what Carl Jung called psychological detachment, when you master your own emotions and refuse to be drawn back into their games. And once you cease being the sole fuel they need to survive, their false persona gradually shatters, their shadow emerges, and finally their entire structure collapses. Through this journey you have learned that your inner boundaries are the strongest walls, self-validation is the most enduring substance, and unspoken silence is the most powerful declaration. Jung once said, "Only when the false self shatters does the true self have a chance to rise." You have not only protected yourself, but also revived a whole version of you that no longer depends on anyone else to affirm your worth. Looking back on the 7 signs, powerful silence, hollow mimicry, escalating gaslighting that fails, the flying monkeys disappear, the final hoovering trick, the mask cracks, and inner disintegration, you realize they are not just stages of a toxic relationship, but stepping stones on the path of individuation. Each sign is a fragment that helps you reconstruct your inner world and redraw your personal map. If you found these insights helpful, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss the next chapters of the Jungian healing journey. Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder of their inner strength and encourage them to explore these 7 signs. Every share, every comment you leave not only helps our community grow, but also fuels those still lost on their way back to inner freedom. All content in this video has been carefully curated under the spirit of fair use, bringing you fresh, profound, and honest perspectives. If you have your own experiences or personal story to share, please drop it in the comments below. Your story could be the guiding light someone else needs. Thank you for sticking with us until the very end. Remember, a silent victory may not be loud, but it is enduring. True freedom does not need fanfare, but quietly blossoms. We'll see you in the next videos, where we'll continue to delve into the heart of darkness and rediscover our inner light. Silence is power, and now you know how to wield it.